Hello. So today's Ask a Witch is coming through coming through the Facebook still because I haven't had a chance to work out what the problem is with YouTube, but that's okay because most of you guys come here anyway. But I will be also putting it on the Patreon page probably tomorrow so that you can view it there. The topic today is magic with children. And I'm, I've done magic with my own children. My children are grown at this point. My son is 34, my daughter is 18. But a lot of people aren't really sure how magic is done with children. And so I was going to talk a little bit about that and kind of give you some ideas about how to deal with children in the circle, but also how to engage them. One of the most important things about doing magic with children is that, if you want your tradition to survive, you have to include children in rituals or they don't ever learn it. We learn what we believe and what we think about the supernatural from our families and from our experiences as children. And so if we never get exposed, if we're always left at home, then we don't learn it. And so if we want to share our spiritual connection, our spiritual beliefs with our children, then we have to figure out how to work with children in circle. And so the first thing that I think I'd like to address is, do I think that children should be able to attend any and all circles? And my answer to that is absolutely not. I don't think children should attend circles that have to do with banishing. I don't think children should attend circles that have to do with sex magic. I don't think children should attend, probably shouldn't attend initiations. But I do think that children should be present at Sabbath celebrations. I think when we celebrate the seasonal tides and the changing of the moon and the changing of the seasons, I think it's very important for children to be present. It's how they learn to respect and revere Mother Earth. I don't think that you can, learn, how to honor Mother Earth unless you do it, unless you learn it, as a kid, unless you learn how to do that. And so being in a circle with children can sometimes be challenging. First thing is, little children always want your attention every minute. So they're always going to be interrupting you. They're always going to be talking and all that kind of stuff. So that can be very distracting. If you are at a large public circle, then it's going to be a situation where you're going to need to explain to them that there are going to have to be times when they respect that quiet is the most important thing. But at the same time, you also want them to participate. And so in a situation where you have children in the circle, the things that you can do, depending upon their ages, is have them help you with things like setting up the altars. Setting up the altars is an opportunity for you to explain what the things on the altars do and what their energy is, why you would set up an altar a particular way, like for a particular Sabbath, why would you have a corn dolly, for example, on your altar? That sort of thing can be explained. And so that's pretty important, I think. With children in circle, discipline becomes an important aspect. I think there's I've been to a lot of circles where kids are really great and they help out and they can be an integral part of the ritual. And it can be really charming. I've also been to circles where children run amok and run wild and there's not really anyone watching them. And that is, of course, not really acceptable unless, of course, that's the energy of the circle. So most children don't really understand some of the more intense aspects of the magic. Like, for example, children don't really understand what the maypole dance is. They understand that it's a fun dance with ribbons and flowers and all of that. They don't really get the whole corollary between, goddess and god. Hi, Gordon. How are you? And so you have to realize that children are coming into it from a very surface sort of level. They are observing. And they also, children tend to be very sensitive to energy. So if the energy of the circle is very high and very intense, the children are going to react to it. And often, you know, like my experience with Lily when she was littler was, even with tattoos, which have big energetic magic, that she would get like a contact, you know, rush out of it and bounce around the house, you know, because she was picking up on the energy of what the tattoo energy is. So, you know, you have to keep that in mind too. If you don't have, you know, if you can't keep some kind of a rein on children, then you probably shouldn't bring them to circle. That's really the bottom line. Especially, I mean, if it's your circle and you're doing magic with them in your backyard with your children, then you certainly can do magic with children any way you like, and you can have all the dancing around and jumping up and down and you know, whatever else they want to do. But if you're in a public circle and you have children, it's just like being in a restaurant or being in a place where you're in public. You need to make sure that they understand that, you know, other people are going to be affected by their chaos, and that it may be difficult for the priestess or the priest to continue to direct circle if they're out of control. So you have to be the judge of that, I think, as a parent, whether or not your child is really going to be able to handle being in circle. Most children are kind of like, most children are kind of awed by circle, I think. And so in my experience, even though they want your attention, most children are, you know, they're kind of usually kind of overwhelmed by it and quiet. That's been my observation anyway, especially in a larger group. And so, you know, they're going to have questions too. That's the other thing. They're going to have questions about what's being done and why things are being done. And you want to really think about, you know, what kind of things do you want your children to observe in a circle? You know, there are things that you probably don't want your child to observe in a circle, like a ritual sacrifice may be something you don't want your child to observe. So you want to really think about, well, what is the energy of each of the celebrations that you would want to bring your children to, and what kind of priestess are you working with? What kind of energy are you working with? What kinds of questions might arise? You don't want to bring a child to a circle where they will misunderstand and be scared. That's not a good thing either. So I think you have to be careful a little bit, especially, and mostly little kids are really great in circle. They're like, you know, just they feel the energy so much that they're just, you know, almost glassy-eyed from it. It's kids that are in the tweens that oftentimes are difficult to control. They're kind of trying to test out their independence and push a little bit on the limits, and it's more difficult to correct them in a circle situation if they're out of control at that age. And so, I mean, I think you have to be your own best judge. The best way to do circle with children is to give them some activities. So, for example, if you are doing a harvest celebration, then gather together some things like some pretty leaves and some acorns and some things that they might enjoy making a wreath out of, and make a wreath. And you could even take like the leaves and have them write, you know, their wishes, you know, going for next spring, you know, like what are the wishes that are going into the ground for winter. You could do in the springtime, we generally in February is a lot about planting seeds of the next year. And so you could certainly, you know, give them seeds in little pots and talk about planting your seeds of intention and you know, while you're planting flowers, and have them do that. I mean, their children are very hands-on and very involved in ritual. They're not going to be sitting still. I mean, I think many of you probably have had experience where you're, you know, sitting in a church or whatever, and you know, you're supposed to be still and quiet. And there's always a lot of giggling and silliness that goes on in situations like that, because children are just not still and quiet. It's just not how the world works. And so learning how to work with their energy. Children don't question magic. You know, they don't question it. They, you know, they embrace the magic as it's presented to them. So if you're presenting to them that they're, you know, planting seeds for the next season of intent, sorry, I have a fly bothering me, or if they're, you know, lighting a candle to bring back the light, you know, in the you know, in the spring or in the fall, If we're doing something around Samhain, which, certainly Samhain is really a great time because it's also Halloween. And, we can really bring a much deeper understanding of why people celebrate that holiday. Certainly we have lots of images of death and, like skeletons and ghosts and things like that. And you can talk to children about, how we learn how to understand these transitions, that we learn how to talk to our ancestors, that we learn how to, um, connect with our family that has passed on at this time of year because the veil is thin, and you can have them, do things like draw pictures, or you can have them bring a picture of a relative that has passed on that they love, or you can put a picture that of a relative that's passed on, like your grandmother or whatever, on the altar. Have them put special things on the altars from maybe pets they've lost, things like that. It's an opportunity to reconnect with those that have passed through the veil. And so we can use that as a time to explain and teach children what that means, and why the world goes through those transitions.